What's the best investing advice you've ever received?
The way companies get big is they sell things. Pay attention to who is the buyer. The buyer matters. Do they have budget? Is this solving a big problem for them? Is it making them more money or is it saving them money?
David Hornik
is an investor, author,
and lecturer at both Harvard and Stanford University.
You're talking about the buyer, you're talking about that being so important. What are your thoughts on how that relationship will change as we start to approach AGI?
I don't think we're approaching AGI for what it's worth, so.
Welcome back to Decoded. My name's Alfie Whattam, and this is the show where I speak to experts about what it takes to build great teams and companies. Make sure that you click the follow or subscribe button for more great content like this, and I hope you enjoyed the episode. David, you invested in Splunk, in GitLab, in WePay, and so many other unicorns. What do you look for when deciding to invest in a startup?
I mean, the real answer is it's all about the people. And the problem with it's all about the people is then the natural follow-up is, great, what is it? What is it about the people? But it is, in the end, amazing people see real problems that they're trying to solve. They come up with some interesting solution that will allow them to solve that problem. And if the problem is a big, interesting problem, one might build a giant company. And over the last 25 years, I've funded something like 45 companies, and 5 of them have ended up, exiting for multiple billions. But I thought all 45 were going to, right? I backed only founders who I thought were astonishing. I backed only founders who I thought were solving some big and interesting problem that had capacity to be giant. So even though Splunk, obviously a $30 billion outcome 20 years after I funded it, GitLab, Bill.com, Fastly, et cetera, multi-billion dollar outcomes. I funded amazing companies that some sold too early, a really great little company called Aardvark, where the founders sold to Google because Google wanted to have them manage some social product. I just sold a company called Vantage Discovery to Shopify because Shopify was talking with them about being a customer and decided that it was just too good to let other people have. And so they bought the company. Vantage Discovery was going to be a multi-billion dollar business, but Shopify decided that they would rather make it a part of their company. And so, I didn't have the pleasure of seeing that happen.
Okay. What would you say makes a difference between a founder who can achieve one of those generational outcomes, like WePay or Splunk, as opposed to a founder that maybe cashes in a little bit too early, or maybe just the business doesn't take off at all and they don't succeed? What's the difference between those superstars and everybody else?
There are all sorts of circumstances. I mean, some people... Look, I don't begrudge the Vantage Discovery founders for selling because they looked at the opportunity at Shopify to build what they had built before at Pinterest. And there were lots of reasons why they thought it was the best and most appropriate outcome at the moment. And then I remember having the conversation with the Splunk founders right before going public. They had an offer to sell the company for more than $1 billion. And, Eric Swan, who was an extraordinary product guy, said, this is the best idea I've ever had. Why would I sell, So, but then you look at someone like a Matt Sanchez, who is now the president of Yahoo. I backed Matt when he was 21, had a company called Video Egg right out of college. And it was clear that he was an astonishing entrepreneur and an astonishing leader. And he was. And he built a company that got to triple-digit millions in revenue and then hit some very serious headwinds. And ultimately, I lost all of my money. The company got sold for, a fraction of what it had been worth. But it was still just very clear to me that Matt was as good as they get. And I would back Matt in a heartbeat again if he started something, right? Bill Clerico, who started WePay, ultimately they sold WePay to Chase. I would hire Bill. I tried to get Bill to join my firm and be my partner. He ended up starting his own venture firm, and he's just an extraordinary guy. So, I just think there are lots of, thoughtful, hardworking, inspiring, dynamic, engaged people who are trying to solve problems. And those are the people you hope you have the fortune to work with.
Absolutely. Okay. So Deloitte awarded you with the VC of the Year, and Forbes magazine honored you on their Midas list, which are pretty impressive achievements, David. Okay. What's the best investing advice you've ever received?
I mean, this is going to be very tactical, but if you're a venture investor, I think people don't pay enough attention to it, which is like the way companies get big is they sell things to people, right? I suppose there are consumer experiences where individuals, are on Facebook in large numbers, et cetera. But by and large, I've invested in enterprise applications, enterprise software, et cetera. The best advice I had was pay attention to who is the buyer. The buyer matters, right? Do they have budget? Is this solving a big problem for them? Is it making them more money, or is it saving them money? Is it adding capacity, or is it diminishing the number of resources they need, et cetera? Like, the buyer matters. And once you start thinking about that, like, who is your buyer, it's very focusing.
When you're trying to figure out and identify who the ICP is, do you think that's going to change much as we start to enter more of a AI and agentic world, and as software as a service almost becomes service as a software to a degree, and you're no longer trying to build the accounting software, you're trying to build the accountant? And obviously it's a much bigger TAM, but the ICP is quite different, because we sell an AI recruiter product. A lot of the recruiters who buy our software, they're a little bit scared that it's going to eventually replace them. Right now, it's much more of a co-pilot, but eventually, who knows, it might get to that point. Do you think the ICP, you're talking about the buyer, you're talking about that being so important. What are your thoughts on how that relationship will change as we start to approach AGI?
Well, first of all, I don't think we're approaching AGI for what it's worth. So that's good. I think that humans will continue to play a meaningful and important role, right? Ultimately, the things that have, gotten large and powerful and important are creative works. They're creative acts. They are people who have figured out problems that others hadn't figured out existed, and solutions that others hadn't figured out existed. And so that will continue to be true in companies too, right? The best lawyers will not be the ones who do the fastest diligence. They will be the ones who are the most thoughtful about the big picture of your business and how to solve problems, right? The best accountants are not the ones who can tell you how much money you have in the bank. They're the ones who can tell you when you're going to run out of money and ways you can avoid that. And so what I would say is, software, everything I have funded in the software world has been marching towards how do you give humans more leverage to be more thoughtful, to be more creative, to be able to, exercise their instincts, their intellect, etc. And so AI is just the next step in that. Do we think that ultimately it's able to remove more of the human interaction? And yes. Do I think that it's going to extract the human? No, I don't. And so to me, it's just software, right? It's just, we're back to the same thing. Customer support answers a lot of dumb questions. Then people figured out this thing called the FAQ. And so you didn't have to answer the ones that were answered all the time. And then they figured out that, we could use texting instead of human voice because it was more efficient to multitask. And then we figured out that you could predict some of the problems based on the caller, and we could predict some of the solutions. And now we have AI that's going to predict some of the callers and the solutions. It's going to start giving answers based on, but it's just a next generation, frequently asked questions, right? And it's not like, and ultimately, if and when it can solve every problem that you encounter, in customer support, there'll be new problems. Because it will solve all the old problems, and then there'll be new problems. So I'm not concerned about it. I think that Software is astonishing. It has always been aimed at doing this thing called problem solving, and it's gotten better at it the 25 years I've been a venture investor, and it will get better at it the next 25.
This is a quick message to tell you about my company, Alpha AI. We built Lisa, the world's first AI-powered recruiter who screens candidates for you on autopilot. You can make your recruitment process 10 times faster, 90% lower cost, and significantly improve the candidate experience, all with our AI agent for hiring. Learn more at welovealpha.com or click the link below in the description. And now, back to the episode. You rightfully so had some skepticism, or whatever the right word would be, when I mentioned about the AGI approaching comments there. And I feel like the definition of AGI has changed so much over the past couple of years, because initially it was, are we going to beat the Turing test? And I feel like we did that a long time ago with like 3.5 or whatever. And now we're talking about super intelligence, or ASI being the new benchmark. Regardless of maybe I say in a couple of years, if we stretch that out a little bit further and say perhaps 10 years from now, David, do you think we'll have a globally agreed upon definition of AGI which has been achieved? Do you think the average person will say, hey, we have AGI and that's universally accepted a decade from now?
No, but that's, look, we're making astonishing progress on this, on artificial intelligence. But it is predictive based on existing information, existing knowledge. And what it isn't doing is inventing new information and inventing new knowledge. And so my problem with this idea that we're marching towards AGI is that it will require a completely different architecture, will require a completely different approach, because one cannot, to my mind, get to general intelligence from existing data and existing intelligence, right? Genius is the ability to innovate. And what we don't see in the music being created, the art being created, and the solutions being offered, right, is innovation. And so, sure, we just saw an extraordinary financing in, AI meets the legal world, but ultimately the best attorneys are the ones who truly understand your business in a thoughtful and interesting way and can help you find solutions that others haven't thought of before. Now, that will not be 95% of the law. And so, yeah, we don't need AGI to replace 95% of the law that's practiced, but for that 5%, which will increasingly be the thing you pay for, it will still require humans, right? And that, to me, that is AGI, is the capacity to replace humans in invention, in innovation, in problem solving in a unique way. And I don't think we're not getting any closer to that, because that would require a very different infrastructure.
Yeah, the legal example is a great point there, and I think that's a very sensible answer in a lot of hype right now. Whereas I think Harvey raised their Series D, I believe, the other day, and like, it's an incredible product that I've checked out myself, and it's a co-pilot which helps the lawyer work 10 times better at 90% lower cost. It doesn't quite replace them. So I understand exactly what you're saying. Okay, let's go on to mistakes from founders, because you've seen thousands of pitches and decks and interviews over the years. What are the common mistakes that you see new founders consistently making, which they should avoid?
Well, I was just talking to someone yesterday about this question of you're being pitched. Because I was discussing the fact that in a given year, I'll get 1,000 intros to companies in my inbox, and I'll meet with 100 of them. And then of those 100, I'll think 10 are interesting, and I'll fund maybe 2. And so what is the thing? What happens between the 1,000 to the 2? So the 1,000 to the 100 is easy. You look and say, oh, this isn't a solution I think would be a fit, or it's not big enough, or it's whatever. Like, there are just lots and lots of reasons why one would not be a good fit for Lobby Capital, for me, etc. So we remove those. Then I have a meeting with 100 of them. And those 100 meetings, 90% of them end in the first 15 minutes. The meeting doesn't end, right?
Yeah.
The meeting goes for an hour because that's the time I've given you. I'm happy to have that time. But within 15 minutes, 90 out of those 100 is not going to move forward. And the reason is always that the founder has taken a view, expressed a position, etc., that suggests that they're either not interested in hearing feedback, are not willing to acknowledge truth, or have, like, ultimately the question is, all these things are hard if you're solving a hard problem. So at some point, I'm going to ask you a question where there is not an answer. And for you to give an answer to a question where there isn't an answer is a fatal mistake, right? For you to suggest you have knowledge of things you don't is a mistake. For you to imply that you are the only person who can solve a thing that lots of people could solve, you just may be the person who's going to solve it, is a mistake, right? And so I'm not trying to trick anyone. I'm just trying to get to know you as a person and understand how you think about your business and what are the challenges. And there will always be a moment in time when you will not have an answer, right? When I ask you a question, you will not have an answer. And if you give an answer to that question, then that will be the end of our conversation. It is not redeemable to take a position that you have an answer to something that is unknowable, right? Mm. And I think that is hard for entrepreneurs because they want to seem smart, they want to seem informed, they don't want to acknowledge the failings of their business, right? Same thing. If you're not willing to say, when I say, what is your biggest challenge? If you come up with no real and meaningful challenge, like I've been in this business long enough to know that there has never been a business on the planet Earth that didn't have significant challenges, even the biggest ones on the planet Earth. So what is the challenge? You have to acknowledge it. And the more you acknowledge it, the more excited I am to work with you. And the less you acknowledge it, the more likely I move on.
So brutal honesty, essentially, transparency, and a willingness to acknowledge one's own shortcomings.
Well, and it doesn't even have to be your own. Like, of course, I talked about Bill Clerico, who was starting this fintech platform, having never really done fintech, had never really, he dropped out of law school, or maybe he was a banker, his co-founder dropped out of law, but whatever, like they hadn't really done this before. It was not a failing to not have answers to the bigger picture questions about regulatory regimes. Mm-hmm. It was just enough to say, oh man, that's a hard problem. Here's what I know. Here's how we're thinking about it. I suspect we'll learn a lot more as we go through the process, but it doesn't feel to me like a daunting problem because of the following things. Great. That sounds amazing. It's why Bill Clerico is extraordinary, right? Because he, to this day, as he's looking at startups, he sits on the board of a company with me, one of the companies I invested in. He's a fantastic board member because at 21, he was doing that. And now at whatever he is, 31? No, he's a little older. He's still doing it.
Okay. So Bill had never worked in fintech before launching that type of product. A lot of people talk about product market fit, and obviously it's very important. Not enough people really talk about founder market fit. And obviously there are multiple different approaches to this. In that example, you backed him in the fintech space without him having any prior knowledge or experience in that domain. So how do you evaluate, and what's your opinion on founder market fit?
Well, if you are the expert on something and you see some, opportunity in that space and you're going to solve it, that's amazing, right? Having said that, it may be that by having been the expert in that thing for a long time, that you don't see the white space, right? Very early in the venture business, I met with the founders of StubHub and was like, oh, secondary ticket market's interesting. Well, prior to that, I had been a lawyer who had represented Ticketmaster and was friends with the CEO of Ticketmaster. So I called him up and said, what do you think? And his answer was, we tried to solve the secondary ticket problem. We didn't manage to solve it. I don't think they will solve it for a lot of reasons that, reasonable reasons, but ultimately because he had been the guy who had invented the system that StubHub was trying to disrupt. He couldn't see that StubHub had a real and big opportunity, right? I don't blame him for that. Over 25 years in the venture business, I've learned to speak with experts, but understand that they will have a very particular point of view, right? So experts could be the perfect person to solve a problem because they see it and they're like, I have to go solve this. But new people to an industry may in fact be better because they are like, why do you do it this way? I don't even understand why you do it this way. Shouldn't you do it this way, right? I funded this great company called MaintainX, and the founders were just like, why is it that people still use clipboards? Everybody has a smartphone in their pocket, and yet you have, people cleaning people in hotels that have a clipboard and says, do these 17 tasks. Boy, wouldn't it be better if instead you tracked how much shampoo was in the shower in a digital platform? Wouldn't that be better? And the answer was, yeah, it was better. And so they created this thing that seemed very simple, not because they had managed hotels or managed, cruise lines or managed the biggest concrete manufacturing plant in the world or managed Cirque du Soleil, except their platform, MaintainX, now does all of those things because they had this thoughtful idea that it would be better to digitize the world than have it continue to be managed on a piece of paper.
So what you're saying, David, is people that really just view it in a first principles approach. No more, hey, we're going to do it this way because we've always done it this way. It's how do we solve this problem in the best way possible? And regardless of what that solution looks like, that's how we're going to do it. And because they don't have that knowledge holding them down, which sounds ironic, but oftentimes is true, they're able to break through and disrupt where others only see the problems.
But I think there's a piece of it, which is you have to do the work to understand the solutions that exist. You have to do the work to figure out what makes sense, right?
Yeah.
What has happened in the past. So you can't just say like, I have an idea and not figure out what happened in the past. But if you've done that work and you say, I still don't get it, then you're perfect. Go. Now you'll encounter all sorts of other problems that you didn't anticipate because you weren't the expert. And the experts will miss those problems, but they might miss the big innovation.
Okay, got it. Outside of venture, you're also a lecturer at Harvard and Stanford. You speak at conferences, you host your own podcast, you write a blog, and so many other things. I think I am busy as a startup founder and a podcaster, an angel and a dad, but you do a lot more. So how do you do all those things without crashing? Like, how do you manage to stay so productive, David?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it is a lucky circumstance that I have my natural inclination is to multitask and I'm not someone who is comfortable doing a single set of things. I'm much more energized. I'm much more excited when my day involves podcasting with you and then a board meeting and then going to teach and then working on another thing and then catching up with a kid and then whatever, right? And so that has just been, my existence. I will say that I'm dyslexic. I grew up, with real challenges when it came to the written word. I had a mom who was a force and kind of said, you're gonna get the tools you need to get through this. But it turns out that the real thing is that the dyslexic brain is about problem solving in a lot of ways. And so I think that's been lucky. It has allowed me to be able to, to manage through a lot of complicated things in real time. And the other thing is I love what I do. And so I'm doing it a lot. It's not like there's no shortcut. If the thing you want to do is not work, then you would hate my life. But if the thing you want to do is work, then you would love it. And I do. I love teaching. I love investing in companies. I love sitting on boards. I love, all of these things that I do every day. And therefore it's super energizing.
You mentioned you were dyslexic or still are dyslexic. It's not something that you unlearn. But a large part of your day involves writing and you know, reading reports and documents and then speaking on them. Well, a lot of people would struggle to do that. How have you managed to make that work?
I mean, I think it is. When I went to law school,
yeah,
it was one of those moments where it was like, oh, the law is the written word, right? And so my first year of law school just was an astonishing number of hours of just powering through books. And you know, the good news is it's not that I cannot read. It's just that it is very hard. It's very onerous. It takes a long time, and in ways that most, you know, many neurotypical people would be like, oh my God, are you not? And it's amazing how often I'll be reading something at the same time with my wife, and she'll say, are you not done? And I say to her, like, how can you still say that to me? But that's the reality. So in that instance, it's do the work until you've figured out a system that allows you to get to answers in different ways. The venture business is fantastic in that regard, because the second I am engaged and excited about a company, then I use the people I know to inform me, not the written word, right? The way I find out about, is this entrepreneur great? Is this market interesting? Is this a real opportunity? Is to connect the company and the founder with people I trust, and then have conversations with them about what they know and what they perceive. And so I get through, you know, it's like the transitive property of knowledge. They're incessant readers. I get to get the wisdom of what they've read without having to do the reading, you know?
Got it. Cool. David, this has been awesome. For people that have enjoyed this and want to learn more about you, where should they go? What's the call to action? LinkedIn, X, your fund's website? Where should they go to right now?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Lobby.vc to see what we're up to at Lobby Capital. TheLobbyConference.com. You can see the lobby, the, you know, conference and community that I've built. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me. I'll tell you this though. People go on LinkedIn and then they send you a friend request and say like, hey, I heard you on the show. That was great and would love to connect. My LinkedIn is actually people I have relationships with. So if you see me connected to someone right now, if you and I were to connect and be like, oh, we had this great conversation, we have a real relationship. But if you just reach out to me on LinkedIn and say, let's connect, I'm not going to do it because I don't know you. Yeah. I want the connections I have on LinkedIn to be the people I know so that it's valuable, because otherwise it's not. I mean, you were trying to end this podcast, but I'll end on this story, which is
keep going.
In the early days of LinkedIn, you know, I remember having this conversation. I was on a panel and Reid Hoffman and the founders of the LinkedIn competitors of the time were pitching these businesses, these social networks for business. And one of Reid's competitors said, you know, I have connected these 7 people to Mark Benioff because I have a relationship with Benioff in the last month. And so think how valuable I am to you, whatever. And I made the joke like, oh man, for Benioff, you're the gift that keeps on giving. Because it's like, you know, I don't know that Benioff wants those 7 or 8 connections. Sure. But what I do know now, and as a result, I didn't end up funding Reid, even though I love Reid as a good friend, and it was a huge mistake. I misunderstood LinkedIn at the time. I literally wrote a blog post on Venture Blog that said, if social capital is capital, you should not let other people spend your capital. Mm-hmm. And I speculated that a platform like LinkedIn would not be additive, would not be multiplicative of social capital. And what I now know is that was wrong. But the only reason it's wrong for me is because the people I engage with on LinkedIn are actual people I know, care for, etc. And so when I say, hey, can you give me some insight on this thing so I don't need to read the physics book? You say, yes, because we have a real relationship. So, okay, maybe not LinkedIn.
My view on LinkedIn is that it's the worst product that I use every single day, and I mean that in the nicest way possible. I think it's a great platform, but when you make the mistake that I have, and you have thousands and thousands of connections that you have no idea who they are, then it really dilutes the product experience. I think if I could go back, I would do what you have done and kept it, to your network. But anyway, it's a little bit too late for me to change that now.
But you did reach out to me on LinkedIn, and that's how we're having this conversation. So it's a valuable platform.
It is. Cool. David, thank you so much for your time. And yeah, people that are listening, check out those links if they're interested in learning more.
Thanks so much. Enjoyed it.
Thank you so much for watching. Make sure that you click the follow or subscribe button wherever you're watching, and I'll see you in the next episode.
Introducing Lisa, the world's first AI-powered recruiter. She's an AI agent who works 24/7, screening candidates on autopilot, conducting interviews in 30 different languages, uploading all the best candidates to your applicant tracking system. Hire 10 times faster at 90% lower cost and significantly improve the candidate experience. Visit welovealpha.com to start your free trial now.